the number is. I don't know how these glasses are going to come across on this video. I won't know until after it's completed, but when I look into the screen, I see the computer screen reflected back at me as two blue rectangles. I can't see my eyes very well. And maybe that's true of you as well. I'm wearing them because it's late at night, and I was warned that blue light from these LEDs or from these devices interrupts the biorhythms. And I remember reading that on a health website somewhere. So I had purchased these for about $3.95 on Amazon, I think. And I'm using them now so that I can make this installment and not be wakened up and prevented from a good night's sleep. Okay. This installment is going to cover the topic of aversion, antipathy, aversion. But I want to address it from a psychological point of view. How and why aversion has played out in my life and how it has really sabotaged my progress and even my social life through a series of connected reactions, for lack of a better word. When I was growing up, my mother labored under a belief that the house should be spotless and that she was responsible for keeping it that way. I rarely saw my mother's face. I saw the back of her body or the side of her seated at her sewing machine, where she did alterations and dressmaking for extra money for our family. And then the rest of the time, her back was to me. She'd be at the sink or she would be just working around the house, keeping the house clean. I remember sitting at the piano for hours on end, singing and playing as a child, and reading books for hours on end. And then when I hit pubescence, it was about daydreaming for hours on end. My mother didn't interact with me much. I would go into my room or go to the piano, and she would be working domestic tasks all day. My brothers were out and about doing whatever. I didn't have any sisters. But in 4th grade, I took up the cello and would bring the school cello home to practice it. And then eventually I obtained my own instrument, and I can remember that this one stands out in my memory. My bedroom was so small that I wasn't comfortable practicing in the bedroom. And I would set up in the middle of the living room floor. And as most cellists will admit, playing the cello takes tremendous square footage. You need 3 feet on the right side of you and 3 feet on the left side of you, and the 2.5, 3 feet that your body occupies. So that's almost 10 feet of width just to play a full-size cello in a given space. And when I would play the cello at home, my mother would run the vacuum cleaner around me as a symbolic gesture that I was in her way, for lack of any other way of explaining that. And I didn't practice regularly, daily or regularly, because it just wasn't convenient in my household. I didn't have a place to do it. The piano was much easier, and I would sit at the piano for hours, and as a result, as an adult, my chops on that instrument are remarkably more advanced. And I don't consider any technical obstacles at the piano because I was just always sitting there playing it. But aversion has played out in my life in a remarkable way. My mother kept the house clean. Furthermore, I would never keep my bedroom clean. I never did a stitch of housework. I didn't cook, I didn't clean. Growing up, we didn't cook together or clean together. We didn't do anything together. So when I became a young adult, I was woefully behind on and both topics, maintaining a clean household and cooking a decent meal. And when I got my first apartment, I found that I enjoyed experimenting. I'd make omelets, and I would, I'd follow certain recipes and make casseroles and things. But I couldn't keep the house clean to save my life. The dishes piled up in the sink until they were breeding microscopic organisms. And I would just cover the sink of dishes with tea towels so that nobody would have to see them if they happened to come in. And I assume the smell in the house was that of, spoiling food in my kitchen, because I just never wanted to do them. And I developed a real aversion to doing the dishes. I would leave them in the sink for days and days and days and days. And the only time I would wash them, this was in my apartment when I was 26. That's when I moved out. I was 26. I would finally wash the dishes when I literally did not have another clean dish upon which to eat. Now that's pretty neurotic. Yep, neurotic. And I'm also a keeper. I keep things. I don't throw them away. I'm not a hoarder, but depending on what room you're in my house, you might say, ooh, is she a hoarder? No, I have some piles. I have a lot of piles of things that I just put off sorting through and dispensing with, and they kind of pile. But they're only in like one room, and maybe a little bit by my bed. It's not the whole house. But aversion, the resistance to doing something, is very closely related to procrastination, except that the psychologists, I think, are pretty much unanimous in the belief that procrastination is caused by perfectionism, that we avoid a task because we're afraid we're not going to do it well. But here's what happens to me. I love to play the piano, and I really enjoy playing my cello. But if I have a deadline associated with either instrument, I'll do the laundry. Last night I laundered all the socks that weren't matched because I really had music I had to learn. And I was doing the unmatched socks instead. And I haven't never been able to understand why I get averted to the thing I love or by the thing I love. Until finally yesterday, I realized the dichotomy. The dichotomy is between the thing I love and the house cleaning. The stuff that I was always told I should care about. The stuff that I never learned how to do. The stuff that a good, civilized, stable, socially well-developed woman takes care of, the domestic chores. But here's what happens. When I finally do the laundry, the dishes, the floor, the cleaning, I am obsessively meticulous, and I don't stop until everything is perfect. I become OCD almost about it. So it's from one extreme to the other, aversion versus complete fixation. Furthermore, I will fixate and OCD about cleaning the house when I'd really rather be doing the music, or when I have to do it. I have this deep-seated fear that if I sit down at that piano, I'm going to let everything else go to heck. Because in the midst of the creative fixation, we stop thinking about everything else. At least this one does. So from childhood, there's always been this relationship of Aversion, love-hate between making music at my instruments and running the vacuum cleaner around the cello, which was what my mother did. It's almost like I become my mother. And I'm fighting directly in combat with the very thing that I always loved to do as a child. Now, as an adult, as a senior citizen, I'm still grappling with it. Aversion as a psychological phenomenon. We get averted by the very thing we love. Out of, I guess the motivation would be guilt, fear, guilt. All neurotic, clearly neurotic. But it was a real breakthrough. I realized, yeah, that's why I washed all the unmatched socks last night. Because the thing I really wanted to do was sit at the piano all night and all day, nonstop, without any respect for morning, noon, night, functioning during the day like quote-unquote normal people. And that drew me to this realization. We have to stop thinking about what other people think of us. It's like there's this unspoken panel of jurors deciding whether I spend my day like a normal person, like a productive, hardworking woman, my mother, who never did anything just to take a break. My mother never had any fun. She sat at the sewing machine, she cleaned the house. Well, she probably would have rather just sat at the sewing machine and not have to stop and get up and make dinner. She hated cooking because it interrupted the sewing. I think my mother's rude awakening was having children and realizing that she was going to have to raise them. And all she really wanted to do was make clothes. And I don't fault her for that. She wanted to make clothes. It's okay, Mom. You didn't have to want to raise children. I never wanted to raise children. And I survived. I've had quite a productive life. But I'm still grappling with aversion. Only the breakthrough happened yesterday. Now I recognize it. And recognition is the first step toward overcoming a block, a neurotic block. Conversion, not aversion. Like the specs. I just wonder if anybody can relate to this. Well, the laundry's clean, rugs are clean, there are no dishes in the sink. And it's nice to have a clean house. I just wish I had the guts to stay up all night and play the piano and not care if people know that I sleep till noon. Who's watching? Not even you. You're just imagined. Did you know that? I'm just imagining you.